Behind those cozy nights at home, thousands of employees at BP go to work every day. People producing more U.S. natural gas. People building grid-scale solar capacity. People turning landfill waste gas into pipeline-quality renewable natural gas. And people delivering all of that power where it's needed. They're part of the more than 300,000 jobs BP supports across the country. Learn more at bp.com/investing in America.
The Subaru Share the Love event is a fulfilling way to get in a great vehicle and support a great cause. When you buy or lease a new Subaru from now until January 2nd, Subaru and its retailers will donate a minimum of $300 to charity. By the end of this year's event, Subaru will have donated nearly $320 million to charity. Visit Subaru.com/share to support a great cause today.
Hey Eagles fans, this is Chris Franklin from NJ Advanced Media, and welcome to the No-Huddle Show podcast, the show where we discuss all things related to the Philadelphia Eagles. Now before we begin, I want to remind you that you can read our content on NJ.com/Eagles and be sure to bookmark it to get the latest Eagles news and analysis. Today I'm once again joined by my No-Huddle Show co-host Bob Brookover, Cayden Steele. Well guys, we reached the regular season finale and the Eagles are coming off a pretty I don't want to say impressive because it was the Cowboys in their current situation, but it was still a big 41-7 win over the Cowboys. It essentially clinched them into the second seed, which we'll talk about that a little bit later. And it also affected an important decision that pretty much has a lot of people covering his team or following his team, has them pretty divided on top of it as well too. But we'll get into that as well too in our opening drive question. But first off, Bob, Cayden, how are you guys doing today?
Doing great, Chris. Just one quick thing about that game. We shouldn't go too deep into that game, but I love the fact that the combined passer rating of Tanner McKee and Kenny Pickett was like 141.1. Is the highest passer rating for Eagles quarterback. In this case, quarterbacks since Nick Foles' perfect game against the Raiders in 2013 when he threw for 7 touchdowns. I found that interesting, and also that they scored their highest point total this season. No, I don't think that Kenny Pickett or Tanner McKee should start in the playoffs over Jalen Hurts, but those were just two fascinating things about that game. And Happy New Year!
Yeah, happy New Year to you too. Happy to you too. Kate, how you doing, man?
Yeah, doing good, doing good. 1 week remaining here in the regular season. I feel like it went by pretty fast. Now we're getting to the point of the year where, my perspective is the best time and 1 week away from playoff football. And I look forward to see what this team will do. They've looked like a Super Bowl contender for the last 2 months, and we'll see if they can put it, see if it translates into the playoffs and they go on a deep run or not.
And we'll get into that in a second right now. But first, we're going to talk about Saquon Barkley. And he had a big game against the Dallas Cowboys, and to the point where he crossed the 2,000-yard mark. He currently has 2,005 yards. But the biggest question is, with the Eagles essentially not having anything to gain with this last game, would they rest starters or would they sit or would they play them and try to get them to break Eric Dickerson's record? He's only 101 yards away from breaking that prestigious record that Dickerson set in 1984. Well, Nick Sirianni came out with the decision and announced it yesterday during his press conference, saying that he was going to rest the starters, including Saquon Barkley. Barkley said he'd love to have a chance to break the record, but he understood that he was to do better better goals ahead of him, i.e. a Super Bowl run and a potential Super Bowl ring that comes with it. So I'm going to start with you, Bob, with this, and then we're going to go to Cayden. Bob, did they make the right decision sitting Saquon Barkley and most of the starters for the season finale against the Giants?
Well, I have to say yes, since 2 days, I guess, a day or two before in print, I wrote that they should sit the starters. They're just. I would love to. It would make our jobs much more entertaining and easier on Sunday if we had Saquon Barkley chasing the record to write about, which we don't. But from a team's perspective, I think you just got to sit him. I mean, think about it this way, and I haven't written this, but I've thought about it. You know, does anybody even talk about Eric Dickerson? Football records aren't like baseball records. Does anybody even talk about Eric Dickerson's record unless somebody's really threatening it? It's not like Joe DiMaggio's 56 game hitting streak, or the home run record, which all has in itself become tainted. Baseball records are just different than football records. Uh, One of the interesting things I found out about Eric Dickerson's it, record, when you really research it, there were guys who had better seasons. I think OJ's 2000 is still the standard because he did it in 14 games. Jim Brown had better seasons. Guys had better. I think Saquon's season was better. One of the other interesting things was, so I looked this up. Two things I looked up about that record. And these are just as important as setting the record to me. Uh, of the 8 other guys who rushed for 2,000 yards, only one of them won a playoff game that year, and that would have been Terrell Davis. The other guys, 5 of them or 4 of them were first round playout outs. 2 of them didn't make it at all. One is Saquon up in the air, and then the only one to win a playoff game was Terrell Davis. He won a Super Bowl the year he rushed for 2,000 yards, and he was the reason why, not John Elway. And the other thing, Eric Dickerson, didn't win the Offensive Player of the Year. He's the only one of those 2,000-yard rushers who didn't win the NFL Offensive Player of the Year. I think Saquon is going to win that. Just as good award as setting a record to me. So the record, the Super Bowl run is so much more important. I love the fact that the Super Bowl is on Saquon's birthday. That story will be told forever. Saquon Barkley signs with the Eagles, leads them to a Super Bowl on his birthday in his first season in Philadelphia. That story would squash an NFL rushing record.
Nice. What do you think, Cayden?
Yeah, it's the right decision, and I get why some people think going for the record would be a cool thing. But from my perspective, they've already accomplished a lot by going for 2,000 yards. And if you want to look at Saquon and just the success that he's had on less carries than Eric Dickerson, I feel like in itself, 2,000 yards is a pretty good accomplishment for what the offensive line and what he accomplished. And the risk of playing week 18 is a lot bigger than the reward of it. Like Bob said, if he breaks the record, it'll be a cool thing. But if they don't win a Super Bowl this year, 20, 30 years from now, I mean, no one's going to really, think about it consistently. And I think generally, if Saquon Barkley got hurt, this team wouldn't be a Super Bowl team. That's the type of impact that he's had this year. And Kenny Gainwell is a solid back, but this offense would change completely. And it would be tough to go through the NFC without him. So the Eagles made the right decision. You got to keep your best player healthy, and he's been their best player this season. We saw what happened last year, and I know that the team wasn't as good, but we saw what happened when they lost A.J. Brown last year in Week 18. The offense, which was already struggling at that point, which became pretty much ineffective completely without him. The offense might be fine and still be able to score some points without Saquon, but it just wouldn't be the same. He's been an incredible player this year, and you got to save him for the playoffs because he can change the game at any point, and these are going to be close games. We've seen him break off 50, 60-yard runs to really change the outcome of games, and he could do that, and you can't risk him not being there for these opportunities. So it's the right decision. And I think the players, maybe there's some disappointment there, but I think winning a Super Bowl will probably be more important in the long run.
All right, and one thing that usually comes with, along with getting a bye week as well too, and one people that would have been rested probably was quarterback Jalen Hurts, but he's still even though after the head injury that he suffered in the Week 16 loss to the Washington Commanders, he's still out, and he still hasn't been cleared the concussion protocol. And it means if he does when he does come back for that wild card round game, it means that he'll be out since then he hasn't played any meaningful snaps. Cayden, are you concerned that Hurts hasn't seen any game action since that injury? And are you worried that he will be rusty when he plays either Packers or the Commanders?
Yeah, I think it's a slight concern that he won't play into the playoffs. Look, he probably, even if he was healthy and he was cleared, he probably wasn't going to play on Sunday anyway. But we've seen Jalen Hurts this year, and I think when he's at his best is when Jalen Hurts is in a rhythm. And that Pittsburgh Steelers game was really encouraging, and he played really well. And then at the beginning of the Washington game, he looked in rhythm and looked like the passing offense was finally starting to click. And I know there was a lot of concerns, especially after that Panthers game, about the passing offense and them expressing frustration. And it seems like they were starting to figure it out. And part of that is just getting Jalen Hurts into a rhythm and getting him comfortable. But now you have 2 weeks where he doesn't play. You can't carry that momentum going into the playoffs. And if some of those passing offense inconsistencies pop up against Green Bay or Washington, I think it's a concern to some degree. But at the same time, I'm not like overly concerned or like panicked that he hasn't played in 2 weeks. I mean, Jalen Hurts has played in playoff games. He's took into the Eagles to a Super Bowl run when he missed the games at the end of the 2022 season, and he came in. And there was worries that he was going to be rusty, and he looked fine during that run, right? So I'm not overly concerned. He's got a lot of playoff experience. He's played in a ton of games, so it's not like he's missed a month or more. I honestly be more concerned if they had the 1 seed again, and he missed the last 2 weeks, and he didn't get to play football almost for like a month. But it's only going to be 2 weeks. I guess when it counts the Commanders game, he didn't play the Cole game, like 2 weeks and a half or whatever. So I'm not overly concerned because he's played a lot of football, but I think there's a chance they start off slow against Green Bay or Washington, maybe in the first quarter until he gets his rhythm back and gets his confidence back.
What do you think, Bob?
I'd rather have them be playing for the 1 seed this week and Jalen playing. And I'm going to go back to what Cayden just mentioned here about the 2022 season. Yes, Jalen was great during the playoffs. Incredibly good again in the Super Bowl against the Chiefs. Maybe the best player on the field, which is saying a lot since Patrick Mahomes was on that field. He didn't really have to be great against the 49ers. The Eagles defense, when they took Brock Purdy out of that game, pretty much won that game. And he was very, very good against the Giants, but he didn't have to be great in that one either because the Eagles dominated on both offense and defense that day. But let's go back to when he did return. He got hurt in the Chicago game, hurt his shoulder. Shoulder injury is definitely different than a concussion. You would think. I was a little surprised that he wasn't. That said he was still in concussion protocol. When Nick said that yesterday on Wednesday, he's going to be out of concussion protocol to practice. Obviously, and the shoulder injury is different than a concussion. He should be fully recovered, but he missed 2 games that year in 2022 and then came back, and the Eagles needed to win that last game to wrap up the number 1 seed that year. And he wasn't really sharp against the Giants in the season finale. He was 20 for 35, 229 yards, threw an interception, ran 9 times for 13 yards. Now that Giants defense was pretty good that year, and that Giants team was feeling pretty good about itself at that point. In fact, after the Giants played that game, a reminder that they played that game without their starters. They were feeling pretty good about their chances of coming back a week later and beating the Eagles in a playoff game with their starters. That obviously didn't happen because by that point, Jalen was sharp again. But it's a little concerning that he had that struggle in that game after a 2-week layoff. But a great point that Cayden made. This guy's he's battle tested. He's been in the playoffs every year. He's been in the league. The Eagles are should be more talented and going to be at home in that playoff game. So they should be able to come out and win that game. And obviously having Saquon, healthy and rested Saquon for a first week playoff game is going to be a lot different for the Eagles too.
It definitely should be. And when you look at this Eagles team, one thing that they can come away with after this Giants game, which won't mean anything really in terms of for the Eagles' sake, is that they can finish with the top defense in the league for the first time since 1991. And they should be able to do it as long as they don't allow something like 730 yards on Sunday. And when you look at the offenses that they could see in the playoffs, Bob, is this a defense that you can trust in the playoffs?
Yeah, I think this defense is very much for real. they went on the road and played Joe Burrow, held the Bengals to 17 points, 280 yards in that game. Say what you will about the Bengals, and they've actually played pretty well down the stretch. Joe Burrow's a great quarterback, and they did a great job against him, held him to 228 passing yards, got a couple takeaways. This defense has become a takeaway machine. They've had 23 since 23 of them, I think, since the bye week. Win the takeoff battle, 9 in the last 2 weeks. Seemed to win the takeaway battle almost every week now. It's very much a real defense. It's cool that they're going to get the number one, be the number one defense in yards allowed. For a long time here, they were also the number one defense in points allowed, and in my mind, they still are, because 2 of those touchdowns allowed by the Eagles were, one was on a block kick and one was on a fumble return, so offensive fumble return. I thought it'd be really cool to be the number one defense in points and yards. I don't know if they're going to get that now, but I think this defense is very much real. They've shown themselves. Another game we can put out there. The Ravens, they hold Lamar Jackson to 19 points. They held Matt Stafford to 20 points in LA. Both those games on the road. So they've proven they can do the job against good quarterbacks. The guy who probably beat him the most was Cayden Daniels. That they scored a season high 36 against the Eagles a few weeks ago. But I still have a lot of trust in this Eagles defense going into the playoffs. Maybe more than anything is I have a trust in their defense.
And Cayden, do you trust this defense right now going against teams, the potential quarterbacks such as you're looking at Jordan Love, you're looking at Cayden Daniels again, you're looking at a lot of good quarterbacks. Even hate to say this, but it's weird to say this, but Jared Goff, you got that. Do you think do you trust this defense against them?
Yeah, I do. Because I'll start out by saying I trust Vic Fangio to game plan. We've seen him stop all different types of quarterbacks this year. Lamar, who's arguably the favorite to win MVP, really slowed him down in that game. We saw him slow down Matthew Stafford after the Rams had success early in that game. Vic Fangio does a really good job of adjusting as well in games. Sometimes these teams start off with a good drive or two, but he always seems to kind of figure them out and find answers. And that's the biggest benefit and the biggest difference probably from last year, because we could talk about the talent all we want, and Zach Bond coming over and turning into a Pro Bowl linebacker, probably an all-pro linebacker as well when that voting comes out, and Jalen Carter taking the next step, and Quentin Mitchell and all that. But Vic Fangio's experience as a defensive coordinator in the NFL, I think, has made the biggest difference, and he's got a ton out of these players. So I trust Vic, so I think they'll be able to compete with these offenses, and maybe they won't be able to shut them down like they shut down some teams during the regular season, but they should be able to give the Eagles a chance to win the game. I don't think these offenses are going to come out and score 30 points or 40 points on this Eagles defense in the playoffs. And then the talent, I do believe in. I mean, they've been playing so well, especially up front with Jalen Carter and Milton Williams and Jordan Davis. Like, that interior defensive line has been incredible for the last month, getting pressure on the quarterback, stopping the run, making the jobs of Zach Bond and Nakobe Dean easier. And Zach Bond's been incredible as well. The linebacker play has been consistent. And then you see a guy like in the last, month or so, I mean, you see C.J. Garner-Johnson, he had the 2 picks against the Commanders, but overall, he's played pretty well, and you're seeing him being closer to that 2022 version where he had an impact with all the turnovers, and he brings a certain energy to the defense. So every part of this defense is working pretty well together, and Vic Fangio is a good DC. So, yeah, I think they could stop most teams in the playoffs. I guess my only concern would be after Nolan Smith and Josh Sweat, who do you trust as your edge rushers to get pressure? Can you believe in Jalix Hunt? Can you believe in Bryce Huff? That would be my biggest question mark if they get worn down off the edge, and or another injury happens to one of those guys. Who's going to be the edge rusher that can consistently provide some pressure and set the edge? And if that happens, if they lose more guys at that position, then I might be worried about this defense more.
And now we're going to turn back over to the offense, and we're going to talk a little bit about the quarterback position other than Jalen Hurts. When you look at the performances that Kenny Pickett and Tanner McKee had, they were pretty impressive when you look at that. Kenny Pickett finished 10 of 15, 143 yards and a touchdown. And then he was dealing with a rib injury heading into that game, and he had to leave after a shot from Micah Parsons, and Tanner McKee had to come in. He set history by being first quarterback in NFL history to have throw 2 touchdown passes under 5 attempts. He went 3 for 4, 54 yards in those 2 touchdowns. And Kate, I'm going to ask you this question. You know, we look at the depth this team has, and we've heard the mentions of Howie Roseman previously saying, "Hey, it's a quarterback factor, what have you." And we know, looking at the draft, looking at free agency, it's not really that deep of a quarterback class that's going to be coming out in both things. Do you think that both Tanner McKee and Kenny Pickett will be on this roster next season?
I do. One, because they'll both be under contract, and I get the idea that maybe you could flip them for a draft pick, and you're always looking for value and opportunities to get better. And if you could get a different player at a position that could have more of an impact consistently, maybe. But at the same time, Kenny Pickett will at least be here, for one more year. They'll probably decline his 5th-year option this offseason. I mean, maybe I doubt they'll opt into that and take on that money, but they'll at least have him here for another year. Tanner McKee just drafted 2 years ago, so he's 2 years under his contract still. So you could let Kenny Pickett, finish out one more year next year. Then naturally you could let Tanner McKee take over as the backup the year after. I think they have a good set of backups. It seems like Kellen Moore and Nick Sirianni think the same thing. They both played well against Dallas. Kenny Pickett, after kind of starting off, a little rough in that game, settled down, made some big throws, just a heave of a ball to Grant Calcaterra, who pulls it down with one hand. Then the touchdown throw to Devontae Smith was really nice, and he seemed a lot better than he did against Washington. And I was a person who didn't think he played that bad against Washington. I thought he made some plays that gave him a chance to win the game. So overall, been satisfied with Kenny Pickett. I think he's a decent backup option, and you have him for another year. And then Tanner McKee comes in, throws 2 touchdowns, doesn't seem too rattled. I know it's a short sample size, but he's looked good in preseason as well. I don't see why you wouldn't bring back both quarterbacks. A lot of teams don't have, one good backup quarterback. To have 2 good backup quarterbacks is such an advantage. And you mentioned it, Chris. Howie Roseman's talked about it before, and we've seen just throughout the last decade or so, this team really values quarterbacks, especially backup quarterbacks. Nick Foles and even bringing in Marcus Mariota last year. I mean, they valued this position at a high cost, and I don't see them getting rid of a good option, or they're good 2 options.
And what do you think, Bob? You think both of them will be back next season, or you think one of them will be moved?
I'm going to say this to Cayden's answer. Bah, incorrect. Yeah, they value quarterbacks, but Howie's, since he's been here, and it's not all been him, the Eagles also love to trade and get value for quarterbacks. Let's talk about Carson Wentz, and when it became obvious that Jalen was the future quarterback, they traded Carson. They got a conditional second rounder that became a first rounder. Let's go back, and this predates Howie as a general manager, but he was around watching it when the Eagles traded AJ Feely. They had AJ, and it was the Donovan McNabb era. A lot of people thought, wow, AJ was a valuable guy. They got a second round pick for him based on, at that time, Detmer was the backup, but it was based on basically him playing one game or 2 or 3 games. The Dolphins saw him, were willing to give up a second round pick for him that the Eagles turned into Reggie Brown. Let's go to Kevin Cobb. When it became obvious that Vic was going to be the starter, they got a second round pick for him, and that became second and fourth, I think, maybe. And they got Vinny Curry and Brandon Boykin out of that. I don't think they both will be here. I don't know which one they'll try to move, because they both have the beauty of being under control for another year. I get Pickett's under control for 2 more years, right? Because he's a first round pick, and then this is just Tanner's second year. Those are valuable trade commodities right now, and part of that value is that they're under control for the next 2 years. I don't think we'll see both of them here. I don't know which one they'll try to trade. They'll probably dangle both of them out there to see what they can get for them. Maybe the market won't be what they think it can be, But I think, knowing Howie, I think he'll at least try to trade one of them.
Okay, it's time for the run pass option, where I'll read a statement and Bob or Caden agrees they'll run with it and explain why. And if they disagree, they'll pass and then I'll also give a reason why they decide to pass on it. So let's get started with this. The Eagles announced their 6 players who will be going to named to the Pro Bowl for the NFC roster. They include running back Saquon Barkley, linebacker Zach Bond, defensive tackle Jalen Carter, left guard Landon Dickerson, right tackle Lane Johnson, and center Cam Jurgen. So, Bob, are you running past the Eagles should have had at least 8 players that should have been Pro Bowlers?
I'm going to pass, but I'm going to go with 7 because Jordan Mailata should be on that list. To me, the surprise was that Cam Jurgens made it in his first year as a center, and the major snub was Jordan Mailata. He should be on that team. Pro Football Focus has him graded as the highest player in the entire NFL. We're not talking the NFC, AFC. We're talking about the NFL at his position. He's had a great year. I know he was out a little bit with injury, but he's the best, in my opinion. He's the best tackle in football. I know Lane Johnson always has the title best right tackle in football, but it's at least 7 if you add him to the 6 that are already on there. It's fine. I'm fine with whoever else didn't make it, but to me, Jordan Mailata was the major snub there.
All right, Caden, you running or passing with this one?
I'll run with it. And one because of Mailata should be on there, like Bob said. He's been one of the best tackles not only this year but for the last 3 years, and I feel he should definitely be on the list. And there is a lot of good tackles in the NFC. Like Sewell made it, and Wirfs, and it is a deep conference for good offensive tackles. But Mailata has gotten severely underrated, and you would hope maybe he doesn't make the Pro Bowl or that he gets an All-Pro nod this year finally and get some recognition for how he played. I know he missed some time, but when he's been out there, he's been incredible. And I'll say 8 because A.J. Brown missed 3 games earlier this season. He's battled with injuries, but he's still 12th in receiving yards. He still has more receiving yards than Terry McLaurin, who did make the Pro Bowl. I know he doesn't have as many touchdowns, and the passing offense has been inconsistent at times, but he's been incredible this season. If you want to, just thinking about the time that he's missed, that he's still got an 1,000-yard wide receiver, he's still got 7 touchdowns, still averaging 16 yards a catch. Just the impact that he has on this offense. Other than Saquon, he's probably the most valuable player on the Eagles. I think he should be a Pro Bowl player as well.
Cool. Let's get to our other run pass option question. We're going to stick here with you, Caden. The Giants will take advantage of the Eagles' backups and win the game. Running or passing?
I'll run. The Giants have been bad this year, but I'll run with it, especially if most of the Eagles starters set. We're going to see players that haven't played most of the season. We're going to see the Sidney Browns and the Jeremiah Trotters on defense and Anaya Smith on offense and Johnny Wilson. Like the Giants, especially if most of their starters play, they should beat the Eagles. They should take advantage of this opportunity. This is also a game that's probably more pressing for the Giants. Who knows what they're going to do with Brian Daboll at the end of the year. This could be, after winning against the Colts last week, maybe in that locker room, they think if this is a win that could save Brian Daboll's job. They got more on the line. They're going to have starters playing for their jobs next year, trying to put on good film before the season ends to prove that they deserve to be back. There's probably be a lot of turnover there next year. So, I think the Giants will take advantage of the Eagles' backups who do play on Sunday, and they'll probably win this game. And in a game that probably won't be very entertaining to watch, but I think the Giants will win.
What do you think, Bob?
Oh, I don't know what to make of this game, Chris. I don't know. I don't know where the hell 45 points came from for the Giants. They had scored 59 in their previous 5 games, and they put up a 45 spot against the Colts. They did give up 33, and they've given up 30 or more in like 4 of their last 6 games. They also gave up 446 yards last week. Their defense is still very, 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 very suspect. And it's a bunch of almost backups with a few exceptions. Uh, some really bad players on that defense, but they do have some offensive players. Malik Neighbors named to his first Pro Bowl, great rookie. Tyrone Tracy has had a good year at running back. Drew Lock, we're only a year removed from Drew Lock beating the Eagles and really sending them deeper into the abyss during that free fall last year. Darius Slayton's a good player. Their offensive line's still really not very good. Um, I don't think the Giants are putting up 45 again, but I could see this being the Giants perhaps winning this game because really they shouldn't. Uh, you know, it'll be something if they do and end up drafting like 7th or 8th instead of the first that they had a week ago at this time. Yeah, it would be such a Giants thing to do to win this game. I'll run with it.
Now we're at the 2-minute drill. It's time where each player, yeah, I'm calling players now, where each person will have have 2 minutes to answer a question. If you don't finish within the 2 minutes, you'll hear a whistle blows and their time is up. So, Bob, their 2-minute question is this: of the Packers and Commanders, who should the Eagles hope to be the 7th seed and come to the link? Your time starts now.
Oh, it's a good one. I'm going to go with the Commanders. I really felt like that last game that the Commanders, if Jalen Hurts doesn't get hurt in that game, the Eagles were in control of that game early. Kenny Pickett, I thought he did a decent job in relief in that game, but he threw an interception after the Eagles had really kind of taken control of the game, and it allowed the Commanders to get back in it a little bit, believe in themselves. But there were also 4 instances in the second half where the Eagles settled for field goals, which they just won't do with Jalen Hurts on the field. They would be much more aggressive offense. Uh, I just think the Packers are the better team, and they're probably the more likely team that we're going to see. They've lost 5 games this year, but they've lost them to great opponents. They lost to the Eagles, obviously, on opening day. They've lost to the Lions twice this season. They and who's their other loss to? I'm sounding like there was a clip of Tom Brady doing this the other day. They also lost. Those are teams they lost to: the Lions, the Eagles, and Vikings. That's it. The 3 best teams in the conference. So you don't want to play that team. They're an explosive team. I think the Eagles are better than them, but I think the Packers are better than the Commanders, and I'd much rather see the Commanders.
Nice, you got it in time. Bravo, very, very good job on that one. Cayden, same question to you. Who should the Eagles face as the 7th seed? Who would you rather face, the Commanders or the Packers? Your time starts now.
Yeah, they would rather see the Commanders. Look, Jaden Daniels has been incredible this season. He was incredible against the Eagles 2 weeks ago. He was incredible against the Falcons last week. But this Washington team is not as talented overall, especially up front. They don't have as good of a defense in terms of personnel. I know Jair Alexander is out for Green Bay, so that does hurt a little bit for them. But I trust Green Bay's roster more, and I trust Green Bay's coaching more. Matt LaFleur has been in this position. He's been in the playoffs. He's been in an NFC Championship game back with Aaron Rodgers. He's been in the divisional round last year, had this team nearly knock off San Francisco if it wasn't for a missed field goal. They're an experienced team with playoff experience, and Jordan Love has that playoff experience as well. More than, Jaden Daniels was a rookie, and he doesn't. So I wouldn't want to play this Green Bay team, especially if Jordan Love gets hot. He's a weird quarterback. Whatever you think about him, when he gets hot, he's one of the toughest quarterbacks to knock off, and I just wouldn't want to be that team that, in the first round where he figures it out and they get hot and he has a lot of different weapons and they can run the ball well with Josh Jacobs and they're well coached and they've been in this position before. I think they're just a lot more difficult. Washington's a fun team and they have a lot to build on. Jaden Daniels is going to be incredible for the next, decade. It could be, rookie quarterbacks are weird, but he definitely could keep getting better and be an incredible player. And they have a lot of cap space going forward, and they're an exciting franchise. But I'm not sure if they're ready for the moment. Like Bob said, the outcome might have been different. So Jalen Hurts doesn't get hurt. The Eagles can run the ball on him. We've seen it the last two games. I know they slowed down in the second half, but if Hurts is out there, it probably doesn't happen. They keep on running the ball. Washington's run defense is not good. Saquon Barkley is incredible. It's a tough matchup. I'd rather play the Commanders.
7 seconds you left. You got it. Bravo. Good job. And we're going to end on that note right now with everybody. I appreciate you guys for listening in. Thank you to Bob. Thank you to Cayden. Make sure to read all content on Eagles content on NJ.com/Eagles. So for Bob and Cayden, I'm Chris. Everybody have a good one. See ya.